Welcome to the Victorian Parent Council VPC Parent Podcast Series. VPC is a registered charity organisation dedicated to everyone who support parents in educating their children. I'm Jackie Vandervelde, your host today.
Hello and welcome to the Victorian Parents Council live event. This is a post-recording of the event that happened with our special guest, Dr Marie Yap from Monash University. And in this special episode, Marie is talking about young people's mental health during COVID-19 and beyond, and how parents can help in this situation. It was a very exciting call with about 500 people registered to hop on the live call. So if you were one of the ones that missed out, please enjoy this recording.
It's wonderful to see so many people with us this evening. My name is Jackie Vandervelde, and it's my pleasure to be your host this evening in conversation with Dr Marie Yap. Marie is an associate professor and psychologist at Monash University. She is passionate about translating research evidence into resources that parents can access to help promote their children's resilience and protect them from mental health and substance misuse problems. She has developed a personalised online program to empower parents with evidence-based skills and strategies as part of her Parenting Strategies program, with the aim of reducing the risk and impact of mental health conditions in children and young people. She's a mum of an energetic 8-year-old and a 12-year-old who she believes is turning 16. And also Marie has a closer connection with VPC because with VPC and Parents Victoria being two of the peak parent bodies in Victoria, and that are both on the Expert Advisory Committee for Partners in Parenting Implementation Project. And Marie is the lead on that as the Chief Investigator. So there is a connection beyond inviting her here this evening. We do know her in another context. So welcome, Marie.
Thanks very much, Jackie. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Wonderful to have you. Now, I've got to ask you, being a mum, a working mum, and in Melbourne, how are you coping with home mum?
Do you want a long version or the short version?
Well, maybe the version that's suitable for this time of the evening.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Well, I mean, I would have to be honest and say that it's not easy. I'm working full-time and with 2 kids. My husband's a great support and, actively involved in helping out, but he's a frontline worker. So most of the time I'm still the primary carer, homeschooling and working full-time, which I'm assuming a lot of parents out there listening in would be able to, relate to. So it's very challenging, but we were all, doing our best to make it work and, trying to find the silver lining. So, there's some days that are better than others. I think that's the short version.
Yeah, that was very correct. Thank you so much. I think everyone's nodding. I can see Fed's nodding, going, yep, we're all living the dream at the moment, hey? So, Marie, we don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this because I think we want to invite you back at a later stage. But are you able just to make some comments about some of the practical research area that you're involved in?
Yeah, so as Jackie touched on earlier, so a lot of my work focuses on how we can better understand parents' role in young people's mental health, try to translate the research evidence that's out there into practical resources that parents find both accessible and empowering. So, really moving away from, not wanting to kind of just do research for the sake of research and then just having more evidence that could be misused to add blame to parents, because it's kind of that sense of, if my child's doing well and successful, then, I feel great as a parent, but then if something starts to go wrong, I feel like I must have been a bad parent, and that's very prevalent. So the focus of our work is really driven by that desire to empower parents, because we strongly believe, and there's so much evidence to show it, that parents have such a valuable role, such a key role, but at the same time, it's not for the purpose of then putting blame and responsibility on parents, but really it's about if we have so much evidence about what parents can do, then, it should be a toolkit in parents' hands. So that's what we've done with our parenting programs, as Jackie mentioned, and a lot of the work lately, since we've developed 3 online programs for parents. The focus of a lot of our work now is finding out how we can further enhance the effectiveness of the programs and how we can reach more parents. So looking at adapting our programs for different population groups. So we have collaborations in the UK, in Norway, and in Malaysia, for example, to adapt for those different populations, and also looking at how the program could be tailored to meet different needs that parents might present with. So where the young person's already experiencing mental health problems, whether the child has developmental disabilities, or families living with various kind of disadvantage and adversities. So to better meet those needs and to empower parents in those settings.
Wow. Okay, so I think we're definitely going to have to get you back to talk about that, and we've got some dates that we'll mention towards the at the end of our chat this evening. But look, Marie, so much has been said in the media about concerns for mental health, both for families and for our children at this time, and especially as Melbourne and Victoria are going lockdown 2.0, as we're calling it. What are some of the trends and challenges that are emerging with young people, young people's mental health at this time, that you're hearing about or observing?
Yeah, so I think in the earlier phase of the pandemic, across the board, in terms of mental health, anxiety was the biggest issue. So, and it's not just for young people, but, across the population, different ages, because this is the first pandemic in all of our lifetimes, right? So there's just so much that's unknown. So anxiety and stress was a big factor. And now in the second lockdown and kind of, going back into lockdown after easing of restrictions, I think the concerns that are increasing now are more around depression. So just kind of people feeling like a sense of helplessness about it all. And, will things actually improve? How long is this going to take? And some of those signs of depression are around, losing interest in things that people or in this case, young people might have been passionate or interested in before COVID, loss of motivation in things that they would otherwise have been happy to engage in previously, whether that's, in terms of schooling, in terms of their hobbies, and even engaging socially with peers. And, along with that sense of loneliness, and with expanded, remote learning, in some cases for young people, it's a difficult modality for them to engage with. So that tends to, build up, a sense of disengagement from school and learning. And the more that builds up, the harder it is as well for them to re-engage. So those are the concerns that are starting to rise.
We're seeing some positive things too, Marie, because I know that we're sort of saying, there's a whole heap of problems, and you've really outlined, I think, things that, certainly in the questions that we're going to address a little bit later on, they've certainly come through in parents' questions. Are there some good things that are coming out of this?
Yeah, I think, there's definitely, positive things that can emerge. And I think for many families, it's, we're all stuck in the same house and we have to make it work, right? So I think for a lot of families, they haven't had that kind of time together for a very long time for some. So I think being locked down within your own household has given some families the opportunity to rekindle quality time. There's not that much you can do, outside of the house. So you kind of just have to get creative and be more resourceful and engage in different activities within the home and increasingly with one another. So I think those are the positives that can definitely come out and I think have been heard from people. And I see someone posting a comment there, precisely, just people getting creative and actually learning to appreciate that, it's not all bad. And that's definitely a great mentality to maintain.
Awesome. So look, we wanted to really devote as much time as we could this evening to answering questions, and we've got quite a number of questions that came in ahead of time. So we will start with those, but can I ask our online audience this evening, if you do have a question, please pop it up in the chat. And if you're watching us on Facebook Live, please enter your questions in the comments section. We have somebody monitoring that for us, so we will attempt to get to as many of these questions as we possibly can. So I need my glasses for this next step, so so that I can actually read things. So our first comment and question that came through is, "Hi, I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. My 10-year-old in particular is starting to feel a real sense of despair about these lockdowns never ending. His comment to me today was, the numbers will go down, then people will go around and spread it again, and we'll all go into lockdown again. It would be great if we could address that loss of hope amongst young people, particularly when fears echo ours, so ours as the parents. I honestly don't know what to say to him because I can't guarantee, of course, that exactly what he says won't happen. And in the shorter term anyway, I have said that it will, and it will eventually end." So what sort of advice can we give parents? I think there's a lot of nods on the screen this evening, but what advice can we give parents to build some optimism and hope?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I mean, just listening to that question, I'm actually quite struck by how tuned in this parent is to how their child is feeling. Which is a great thing, you know. So hearing something from a 10-year-old like this is quite heartbreaking for a parent. But it's great that the parent's able to look beyond those words and recognize that the child is struggling with a sense of hopelessness. And at the same time, if the parent's tuned in enough to know that they are also struggling with that and just being honest with that, which is great. It's for other children, you know, the same sense of loss, of hope, might be expressed differently, you know, in a negative, I can't be bothered anymore attitude, or, you know, even seemingly rebellious behaviors towards authority. And they, you know, I think the important thing is, you know, however it's manifesting, so to speak, for your child, as a parent, it's really valuable if you're able to tune in to what your child is feeling and actually really thinking behind the words and the behaviors that they are expressing, and to recognize that. And I mean, I think in a time like this, hope is such a fragile thing. You know, when we're confronted with so much uncertainty in a situation that no one fully understands and certainly can't control. You know, when we look at, you know, what experts in the field of trauma and mental health in the face of widespread hardships and disasters, what they have highlighted is the importance of allowing ourselves to grieve over, you know, what's going on, you know, what we feel we have lost, you know, to acknowledge that the loss is real, you know, the pain of the loss is real, and then, you know, helping ourselves to let go of the loss. And that's a really important part of the grieving process. And then beyond that, you know, really it's about choosing to accept that certain things are certainly out of our control, and focusing instead on what we can control. So, you know, so as a parent, if you haven't already, you know, you can be real with your child about your own sense of uncertainties, you know, and you could also talk about, you know, what could be going on out there in other people's lives, whether it's friends or family, or work friends, or just, you know, from the media, you know, if your child's exposed to that, to have that conversation open, for your child to be able to talk through these things and to hear you talking through that. What I would like to emphasize is, as parents, it's easy to be sucked into this, but it's really important that we don't ever allow ourselves to feel like we need to guarantee our children anything. You know, we obviously instinctively, intrinsically, we want to give them the best. We want to protect them from what we believe could hurt them. But it's important for us to realize that our role as parents is not to protect our kids from the harsh realities of life, pandemic or otherwise. Our role is to support and empower our kids to develop their capacity and the skills required to face these realities and still thrive. You know, that's certainly easier said than done, but I think it's in the first step, it's important that we step away from that pressure on ourselves, to feel like we have to assure our kids or guarantee, safety or security to our kids, beyond, regardless of, whatever else is going on, but instead to focus on how you can work alongside your child to problem solve what's going on, to talk about, there are certain things we clearly cannot control, we cannot predict, we cannot dictate, what goes on from here, when this pandemic will end, and when these restrictions, will cease. But accept that we also can't reverse or undo what we've lost. But it is important to speak with our kids about, how we respond to what's going on. That's the bit that's within our control. And how we respond emotionally, how we respond in terms of strategies that we are using, to cope, as well as, in terms of, as we were saying earlier on, about being resourceful and creative about how we can still make the most of this time and the opportunities that seemingly, the challenges of the pandemic are imposing on us. And you can do that, to focus on, what we can control is we can control and determine how much we grow through this time. And that does depend so much on our choices around how we respond emotionally, behaviorally, the way we think, what thoughts we entertain. And this is, we're talking about growth as parents, not just for the kids, but as parents ourselves, of course, our kids, and as a family, you can grow together through the challenges. And I think focusing on those bits would be really vital at a time when there's just so little that we feel like we can control.
That's terrific, Marie. And I think, what you were saying there is this is new for all of us, right? So it's new for our kids, it's new for the parents, it's new for families. So it's not we're all learning as we go. Look, there's some terrific points being made in the chat here, and for the benefit of people who are watching us on Facebook Live, people are putting in some comments about the sorts of resources that are around that you might want to link into. So the Raising Children Network for information and ideas on how to talk to children about COVID, that is a good resource. There's some good conversation pieces there. Mm-hmm. One mother is saying that she finds practicing gratitude helpful when hope is fading, being honest with them, trying to focus on the positives, and even looking ahead, as we don't know what is going to happen, but we can choose to tell ourselves a good story, a story of hope and positivity. So there's we're all finding new ways of dealing with things. Marie, what can parents do to get children back into hobbies? Because you mentioned that, I think lack of motivation has come through, or lack of interest in things that they had previously been doing, or had been doing, can't do anymore, or restricted in some way. How do we get them back into those hobbies if they've lost motivation once those, restrictions have been lifted?
Yeah, it is definitely a challenge, isn't it? Because of how extended the restrictions are. I think one of the things to look into is to find out what it is about those hobbies that your child enjoys. And hopefully enjoys still, so which component of it? Was it the physical activity? Was it the place where it was done? Was it the people that they could do it with? And see if there are, again, being creative and resourceful, seeing if there are other ways that they could kind of engage with those components that they enjoy, perhaps in slightly different ways, that still fit within the restrictions. So if you can't, engage in footy, in a team, but, you could still kick the footy when, stage 4, we're out of stage 4, perhaps, so it's all, if you have a backyard, that'll be a good option. So, being a bit more creative, if it's the physical activity, if it's the, the social component, are there ways to recreate that, virtually? So kind of thinking about those elements that really hook them in, about those hobbies previously, and find ways to keep that interest alive where possible. And I guess another thing to consider is, you know, if there are other outlets or new hobbies that still provide a similar or related enjoyment for them, and you know, maybe it's an opportunity to try a new hobby that still hooks them in. So those would be some things that I could suggest.
Sorry, lack of physical. Sorry, yeah, lost me. I'm back. lack of physical energy. So you know, this is. I mean, we're restricted. We can't move around too much. You know, so all of that's in place. But parents are saying, and we had a lot of questions about this, about how to respond to that lack of physical energy. It's hard enough at the best of times sometimes, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. I think that in the first instance, as a parent, I would want to find out what's underlying the lack of energy, and there are quite a lot of different factors that could influence our energy levels, right? So whether it's related to how they're feeling, you know. So as we were talking earlier about, you know, is it lack of motivation to get active? Is it related to a loss of hope about, you know, what's the point of this? It could be an early sign of emotional problems. But, you know, there are a lot of kind of other seemingly more natural factors, like, you know, how have they been sleeping? You know, has their sleep hygiene been affected, sleep hours and quality? Have they been eating healthily? You know, because that certainly affects our energy levels. And you know, in fact, you know, having reduced physical activity is going to reduce our physical energy levels too. So I think finding out, you know, and you could do this in a conversation, you know, try to do some detective work with them, depending on the age of your child, problem solve with them if they're a teenager, and you know, get to the bottom of that. And it will take some effort to get back on track, you know, with you know, tuning up the energy levels, but you know, it certainly is worth the effort.
Marie, here's an interesting one. This comes up quite regularly, I think, too. How to really help, in this particular case, boys that are getting lost down the rabbit hole of connection with technology. So, I mean, that's the way they're connecting with their friends. I mean, sometimes it's the only way they can do that now. So, but it's certainly taking up a lot of time, and parents are concerned that that's probably going to become a problem sooner rather than later, or a challenge sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you know, that's not even, you know, considering the fact that a lot of this technology that young people are engaging with are specifically designed to be addictive. So, you know, it's designed to hook them in. That's how they get their profits. So I mean, I think it certainly is a very real challenge, and you know, boys and girls alike, and perhaps so more so with boys. And you were saying, Jackie, that you know, that's how they engage with friends. In fact, I would say that's a better version, because you know, there are lots of technology addictions, technology-related addictions that don't involve the social interactions, which kind of makes it even more challenging sometimes, because that's, you know, they are sucked into the technology addictions at the expense of social interactions. So I think, you know, kind of, it sounds a bit similar, my response to what I said earlier, but it's actually finding out what it is that they enjoy about whatever they're doing with the technology, you know, because there's so many different reasons that we engage in technology for, and, you know, just finding out a bit more. Again, thinking about, you know, are there alternative ways to gain that enjoyment that doesn't involve them spending 6 hours on the technology every single day? You know, trying to find variations to their technology engagement that are more acceptable to you and hopefully more beneficial for them as well. You know, so in some cases, you know, if you're able to engage in the gaming with them within, you know, agreed boundaries, if they're able to engage socially with friends, you know, doing those, you know, gaming or whatever, so kind of creating that activity in the context of social interactions. So trying to pair that with, you know, suppose more desirable behaviors. And, you know, at the end of the day, you know, have a good conversation with your child, you know, just be open about your concerns regarding their usage, and talk about, this really does concern me, if hopefully they would, acknowledge it, but, it is not a good habit to be, stuck in. So problem solve with them, and discuss what appropriate boundaries would be, and try to be consistent with maintaining those boundaries. And, obviously, it's not something, they'll agree to and then they're stuck with for life, right? So we adapt those boundaries and those agreements with our child, with their maturity and, with their behaviors as well. So having that kind of conversation, if you haven't already, would be a great place to start as well.
Yeah. So we're finding new opportunities to have conversations about probably some issues that were maybe manifesting themselves prior to lockdown anyway. We've got a lot of parents have come forward and said they're having trouble now with motivation around schoolwork, and you totally understand that, but it's kind of, we've got to live with this now, for another, well, really till the end of term, and who knows beyond that, when we might have to, maybe pockets, hopefully not the entire state again, but hopefully, if it happens, just pockets. But parents have been really hard on themselves. We found that in the first lockdown. They were saying they felt that real guilt and also pressure to make things happen, with regard to schoolwork. But if your child is not motivated and you're really, really struggling, Marie, what advice can we give parents?
I guess if it's unusual of your child to be so unmotivated about school, definitely it's worth finding out what is underlying that, whether that's, again, depending on the age of the child, whether it's a conversation you can have with them, conversation you could have with their teachers. It would be good to get a better understanding of what's going on. If the child is really struggling with motivation, maybe, pulling back on expectations would be a really important first step. So as you're saying, Jackie, we have the tendency to be really hard on ourselves, and sometimes that's also reflected in the way in the expectations we have on our child. And so I think finding out what it is, and in some cases, the disengagement from schooling could be almost a manifestation of a rebellious kind of like, I've just had enough, with all these authorities and restrictions and limitations. So, getting behind what is, what the behavior that we're concerned about in this case with disengagement in school would be a really important place to start.
Look, I totally agree with you, and I think too that this period we're probably going to see, when we're going back to school, probably greater incidents of school refusal, and I know that lots of parents are concerned about that. So I think you start having those conversations with school, with teachers as soon as you can, if you are concerned about that, so that can be a return to school plan that's not going to be as stressful, not too stressful.
Yeah, absolutely.
What can I do? So here's a question here: how can I address my daughter's extreme need for a sense of control via obsessive behaviours during this time?
I think it's hard to know from that question how extreme and how obsessive are. So I think at a more general level, my gut response would be having honest conversation with your daughter about what's going on, what it is that they are afraid of, kind of like what's the worst thing that could happen, kind of thing, if you didn't engage in your obsessive behaviors, whatever you might call it. Find out if the young person actually believes or realizes that their behaviors are excessive, because sometimes they don't realize that, and lack the insight into what's going on. Is it something that they can actually, let go of at will, or is it that they are being controlled by their need for control. And you know, if it's something that they can actually pull back on, you know, at will, then, you know, perhaps looking for alternative ways that they could channel their energy that would be more beneficial than, you know, just trying to, you know, line things up exactly the way they need it to be. And yeah, so I think, you know, if it's something that really concerns you as a parent, like if it's starting to impact on your child's functioning, you know, so it's that need for control and that excessive obsessive behaviors are starting to affect their ability to interact socially in a beneficial way, you know, with their family, with their friends, engage in schoolwork and so on. If it's affecting their general functioning, then it would be important to seek a professional opinion on that.
Thanks, Marie. How do we get our teenager to open up about their feelings during this time? I think it's probably not just a this time question, that's an any time question, really.
Yeah, learn mumbling. Yes, it's a very, very common challenge with teenagers. I mean, obviously, it depends a lot on the, you know, the nature of your relationship, the quality of your relationship with your teenager. You know, I suppose before they hit adolescence, perhaps, you know, kind of the foundation of your relationship. But I think with teenagers, sometimes we need to be able to find those moments when they are actually open to talk. You know, with many kids and including teens, this is actually just before bed. So finding out what is best timing for your child, you know, while you're side by side engaging in a shared activity rather than face to face. Sometimes, you know, that's less confronting for teens, especially if you're talking about something that they might not be naturally comfortable opening up about. That, you know, finding the optimal time is important. I think, you know, I guess again, depending on how old your teen is. So, you know, if you're talking about younger teens, or if your child, you know, by nature has never been kind of, you know, the most intuitively tuned into their own emotions. Sometimes, you know, putting labels to the possible emotions they might be, you know, expressing through their behaviors or their words could help. And to do this for both positive and negative emotions, of course. So, you know, if you are pointing out negative emotions, to be careful to do it in a non-judgmental way and empathic way, you know, and to maintain that, you know, I'm genuinely curious and I care, you know, especially if it's a negative one, you know, saying things like, you know, sounds like you know, might be feeling a bit, you know, X, whatever that is. Or, you know, if you're comfortable or if it's appropriate, you could also say things like, well, sometimes when I say or do things like that, it's because I'm feeling, you know, Y, X, Y, Z. Is that what's happening for you as well? You know, so kind of having those conversations in a non-threatening way, and you know, almost casual way, sometimes works better with teens. It's also important, I think, for us to reflect on how we normally communicate with our teens. So if most of our conversations with our teens are nag, why haven't you done this? When are you going to do that? That does shut things down sometimes. So, you know, kind of maybe reflecting a bit on how you normally communicate with your teen, that could make a bit of a difference. And then, you know, the other thing is with teenagers, I suppose with kids, you know, give them time to put their thoughts into words. It might not come naturally so quickly to them. And just because you've asked them a question doesn't mean they would have a direct response to your question within 2 seconds, especially if it's about a deeper, you know, kind of thing like, you know, how are you actually feeling about this? Because they might not actually know, you know, so they need time to process it. And, you know, I guess bottom line is to keep trying, because certainly it's worth it. And just because they, you know, shut you off the first time, the second time, the third time doesn't mean they won't respond the fourth time, you know. So it's, you know, we all love our kids, and they are worth it, you know, and you know, sometimes it can be hard to be pushed away, but, you know, because we genuinely care, that will come through.
That's good, and I can attest to the fact that a no answer doesn't necessarily mean they don't know. It does actually mean they're thinking about it. So give them the space to actually do that. Yeah. I think as parents, we sort of want to jump in and, you know, fix it and get a conversation happening, but sometimes the silences are just as important. Look, we've got a good question that's come up, and it's come up a couple of times in the chat about how to seek, or who should we be seeking professional help from or opinion from. Who should parents, if they're concerned, you know, you mentioned concern if you think this behaviour of wanting control is out of the ordinary, etc. Who should they go to? Would that be a GP first? Go and speak to their GP?
Yeah, I think that's what most people would do, because, you know, I guess most families would have like a family GP that they would know and they could relate to. So that's definitely a great place to start. There's certainly a helpline that, you know, you could call. So you could call Kids Helpline as a parent and relate, you know, describe the challenge that you're facing with your child. Could encourage your child to call. You could also call Parent Line, for example. So there are lots of these avenues, and because you will have the opportunity to actually talk through the details of the challenges you're facing with your child, in those conversations, you know, they can then provide more specific and relevant referral suggestions in that context, which, you know, it's a bit difficult for me to do in this context.
Yeah, no, I understand that, Marie. And for parents who are looking for that help, you know, telehealth has expanded exponentially, I think, during this time. So, you know, all of that is available to people online. I know there's some excellent telehealth providers around where you can actually get that help now. So, interesting question here. What do we do when we're met with resistance to do activities we know are beneficial for our children? So like walking outside, I know that might be a bit limited at the moment with the situation in Melbourne in particular, but how do we actually, knowing too that we've still got to remain, you know, relationships have to stay intact, we've still got to be mum and dad, and we still have to get along. How do we handle that resistance, Marie?
Well, I think, you know, beyond what, you know, we've already talked about, kind of, you know, find out what it is that's underlying that resistance. But I think, you know, again, this is one thing which it would push our, you know, our ability to get creative. So, you know, for some parents, you know, making that activity your special one-on-one time with your child, you know, that might work with some kids. You know, with some kids making a game out of it. And I'm not talking about, you know, let's go pick up, you know, things from the park, you know, with a young child, but, you know, being creative about how can we make this a game that's fun. And, you know, if you have a teenager, they might have great ideas themselves, you know, if that becomes a shared activity. So I guess, you know, if it's about physical activity, there are lots of ways to get physically active. So, you know, being really creative about it, pairing that with other things that you would want to do that you value, like, you know, spending time together and as a family or one-on-one, or doing other things that they already enjoy, and making a physically active version of it, for example. And, you know, there are lots of kind of virtual, you know, aerobics and disco, and, you know, like there are lots of these creative options that are out there. So those are also, you know, things that you could consider as variations that perhaps your child might enjoy more, and hopefully that actually naturally hooks them in.
Oh, good suggestions there. We've got some really interesting comments in the chat. We've got one parent's got a high cardio exercise has been helping their 11-year-old, getting away from the screen, and much happier after running around for 20 to 30 minutes, really noticing the difference. I also know some families that have been doing, you know, marathons at home with just activities, you know, rather than necessarily about doing the running, which is obviously a bit tricky at the moment, but actually doing so many hours of that, or so many minutes of activity a day, and counting that towards the, you know, a marathon run that they're plotting on a map somewhere. So, you know, I think people are getting making fun, you know, making it fun, which is really interesting too.
Absolutely.
Marie, how can parents work with their children to move them from just getting by to thriving during these times?
I think a lot of it is in our mindset. So kind of going back to where we started, really, it's focus on what we can control and influence, and really going at it. So making that the goal, so let's work out how we can better manage, how we can better cope, how we can make the most of these opportunities we have at home as a family and so on, and highlighting how we're all growing in our ability to be creative and to be resourceful and to build those relationships that pre-COVID we didn't have the same kind of opportunity to build. So focusing on the positives, it's definitely very valuable. I think the other thing I would highlight as well is to be prepared to adjust our expectations. So as parents of ourselves, our expectations of our kids, and expectations of our family and what we can do given all the external constraints, so to speak. So I mean, I hope that doesn't sound too contrary to what I just said about focusing on what we can control, but it's actually being realistic about expectations. And for some people it means adjusting back. What you would have expected your child to be, if your child is in year 12 and was a school captain and you were expecting all kinds of amazing things that they could have accomplished within that 1 year. 2020 has turned out to look very different. So being able to adjust your expectations back and really sit with your child, because surely they would be trying to manage those disappointments too. So I think that's really important as well. And I think and this sounds a bit kind of by the side, but to help your child thrive, as a parent, make sure you are taking care of yourself. I cannot highlight this enough, the number of parents that have come to us to say how challenging things are for them and being really honest about it. I think it's really important that we do, in a sense, prioritize our own self-care. And kind of almost like quoting what Air Stewards say, you put on your own oxygen mask before you help those around you, and that includes your kids. So the more we are able to thrive ourselves as parents, the more equipped we would be to support our child wherever they are in terms of their position in this current situation.
Oh, that's I think a lovely way to start to wrap up, Marie. We just appreciate your time this evening so much, and everyone with the comments that have been put online. I think we'll grab the resources I think that people have been putting in the chat and make sure that we get a record of that, possibly on the website for later, because there's some really, really good information that's been put up there. Can I also say that we're going to have Marie back here with us on the 17th of September and then again on the 22nd of October. And we're going to take on some other themes related to your work and this issue. Hopefully we're not sort of in the same situation that we're in now. Hopefully things have moved on a little bit and we're actually able to perhaps have a different type of conversation, which might be related to integrating back into school and back into life a little bit more. So I would like to take the opportunity to say thank you so much, Marie, for your time this evening.
Thank you. It's been great to speak to you, Jackie.
Okay, and thanks to everybody online. It's been delightful having you. Check out the VPC website, brand new Victorian Parents Council website, and have a check it on social media as well, because that's where we're putting all of the information about upcoming events. Thanks for your participation this evening. It's been lovely having you with us. Good evening. Thank you to our guest speaker. We hope you enjoyed today's topic. Want to know more about this podcast and other VPC podcasts? Please visit the VPC website, vicparentscouncil.vic.edu.au, and leave a review. We would also welcome you to contact us if you would like to be our guest, or if you have a topic around parenting and education. Thank you to Melbourne singer Emma Sidney for her permission to use her soundtrack, Cherish. Until next time, thank you for listening.